Hi, everyone. It is 5:30 on the dot. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to make sure that we are able to get us started. So I'll start off by introducing myself. I'm Colleen Gibbons. I work for the Center for Court Innovation, and I've been involved in this programming because I am a participant in the Bon Shennecken King series on race and justice in Central New York, which is organized through the Onondaga County Bar Association with a team of individuals who have worked to plan several different events in the past few years here in Syracuse. I want to acknowledge that Bon Shennecken King has sponsored these programs and has been generous in their sponsorship. And so we thank them for that and their ongoing support of Race and Justice series in Central New York. Today we are here for Invisible Under the Law, Racial Injustice and Bias Against Asian American Pacific Islander Communities. We're going to use AAPI often, so know that that stands for Asian American Pacific Islander. One thing that's really important to note when talking about Asian American and Pacific Islander communities is that this is a very, very expansive group. It encompasses many, many nations, land masses, religions, and just entire different ethnic groups. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that is, but we wanted to acknowledge that up front that our panel is not able to represent all of those things at this time, but we do recognize that all of those identities are present under that label of AAPI. To start out tonight, I have the privilege to introduce the Honorable Judge Ali, who is a supervising judge in New York City Civil Court. He's the New York County Commissioner, Franklin H. Williams Commission President, and the president of the Asian American Judges Association of New York. So I'll allow him to say a few words before we get into the rest of our panel. Thank you so much for being here, Judge Ali.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you for those kind words of introduction. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak and to address this body. This program looks wonderful, and I'm sure for all the attendees, you're in for a real treat with the panelists. And I want to also thank the Onondaga Bar Association. That's the beauty of Zoom and technology now. I'm sitting in New York City Civil Court in Lower Manhattan, but I can connect with all of you throughout the state, lower, upstate, downstate, and everywhere in between. I'm president of the Asian Judges Association of New York. We are a statewide association. So if you include, or if you count all of the 1,256 judges in New York State, the AAPI, the Asian American Judges Association, we count as AAPI judges 48. 48 judges out of that large number, which means the AAPI representation of our judiciary is something like 3.8%. That's like a rounding error. But while we are small in number, we are certainly large in participation. Tonight's panel topic, Invisible Under the Law, is quite appropriate because when you look at the judiciary, one might say, with those small numbers, are you invisible in our judiciary? And the question is, how do we make ourselves visible? If we are invisible and things are happening to our community, how do we make ourselves visible and part of the community in a way that our numbers reflect? It is such a daunting task to count what AAPI means and the representation. It sounds easy enough with the acronym, but when you cast the net wide, you see that we are a vast, rich organization of people, and our judiciary reflects that. So while we are 48 is better than we were a decade ago, we certainly have work to do. So I want everyone to keep up with us, keep up with the Asian Judges Association, and hopefully for years to come, we will grow that number. What number will I be satisfied with? Certainly numbers in the thousands. So we have work to do, and where we are now is a good start, but we certainly can get better, and we certainly can move from being that small footnote number to one that's truly visible in our judiciary. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Judge Ali. We are, again, very thankful that you are able to join us tonight and offer those intro remarks. A few housekeeping matters as we jump into the main program. There will be a CLE code that will be announced live later on in this session. We will also be sending additional materials that will be referenced. They will be sent via email as a follow-up after this session. And you will see on your screen that there is a little Q&A box. You can feel free to use that Q&A box to enter any questions that you have throughout the session. We will facilitate those questions later on during the panel of questions that will follow a couple presentations. So I want to get into announcing our first speakers. First up tonight, we have Professor Mary Cito. She teaches at the Syracuse University College of Law. She's the daughter of Chinese immigrants. She's also a graduate of Wellesley College, Westminster Theological Seminary, and Columbia Law School. Prior to entering teaching, she practiced law in New York City. Now she teaches contracts, business associations, Asian Americans, and the law at Syracuse University. She writes about property discrimination and ritual and law in China and the United States. Professor Cito is currently overseas. She is available over the phone for the session, but she has kindly provided for us a video recording of her comments, and then she will be available live during the Q&A later on. So again, we're so thankful that you're able to join us, Professor Cito. We look forward to hearing from you.
Hello, my name is Mary Cito, and I'm here to give you an introduction to Asian American legal history. First of all, I am an Asian American. My parents, Paul and Clarice, they came to the US as refugees in the late 1940s. And we'll see that this was not a coincidence, their arrival in the late 1940s. They married in New Jersey, and I was born in New York City, where I grew up. So the reason why they were able to come to the US in the late 1940s, as we can see, is that we can divide Asian American history into 4 eras. We have the pre-exclusion era, where Asians were welcome to come to the US without restrictions. And then we have 1882 to 1943, where first Chinese and then other Asians were considered non-assimilable. And they were denied immigration, the right to immigrate, and the right to become citizens in the US. And so it's not an accident that my parents end up coming to the US in the late 1940s after the exclusion era ended. However, we have a third era, which I call the conditional inclusion era. And this is where Asians are considered, oddly enough, now models of assimilation. So you've heard the term model minority. The term is actually model assimilated minority. So Asians are considered models of assimilation into white culture. But coexisting with this conditional inclusion era is what I call the re-exclusion era. Most notably, after the 9/11 attacks, South Asians are racially profiled. Today, during the pandemic, East Asians are considered disease bearers and brutally attacked during the pandemic. So I often wonder, what would the US look like if we had not artificially excluded Asians from immigration? So if you look at these charts, you can see that Asian immigration was similar to other immigration from other countries to the US, but then artificially suppressed beginning in the late 1800s. And it really is not, the suppression is not lifted until the 1965 Immigration Act. So today, Asians are the fastest growing minority group in the US. But I often wonder, what if we didn't have that artificial suppression of Asian immigration for that long stretch from the late 1800s until 1965? The US would look very different. So if you look also at the chart on the left, first China was barred from sending immigrants to the US, then Japan, then the whole Asiatic zone and Eastern Hemisphere with the 1924 Immigration Act. So pre-exclusion, first Filipinos settled in the US, but a large wave of Chinese came in for the 1849 gold rush, California gold rush. However, they were subjected to brutal violence. California passed a foreign miners tax to discourage them from coming. Tax collectors would come around and beat Chinese, murder Chinese. Like Blacks and Native Americans, Chinese could not testify in court. And so the murderers were not punished. You could get away with murder in killing Chinese. Chinese and other Asians were also recruited to build the Transcontinental Railroad, the western part. And this was the part where you had to literally blast through the Sierra Nevadas. So hundreds of Chinese lost their lives, sacrificed their lives to build the Transcontinental Railroad, which, as you know, was essential to building the US economy. While Chinese are being recruited to build the Transcontinental Railroad, the US negotiated the Burlingame Treaty with the Chinese, which basically was supposed to give equal rights to Chinese in the US and US citizens in China. Burlingame, by the way, was an abolitionist, and so he fought for these equal rights. However, the Burlingame Treaty was short-lived. And for instance, in 1879, California attempted to basically exclude Chinese with Article 19. This article was titled Chinese, and it held that Chinese are detrimental to the well-being or peace of California. And therefore, the California legislature was authorized to ban their employment, to remove them from the state, and to limit their places of residence. And then Congress passed in 1882 the Chinese Exclusion Acts, which were not repealed until 1943. So this was the first US immigration law that targeted one nation. And diplomats, merchants, students were still allowed, but no Chinese laborers were allowed. And so Chinese and then later on other Asian laborers were scapegoated. They were accused of stealing jobs from other immigrants, and they were accused of being immoral, being disease bearers. So during the Exclusion Era, there was widespread violence against Asians because discrimination was legal against Asians. The largest mass lynching in US history was in Los Angeles, Chinatown in 1871. But up and down the West Coast, there were massacres against Asians, and they would be marched out of town, their property destroyed, and themselves brutally attacked. Again, they were subject to property discrimination, they were subject to education discrimination, residential segregation because of eugenics teaching. So today we think of Chinatown and other Asian neighborhoods as quaint places to shop and to eat, but they existed because of residential segregation. Chinese and other Asians were not allowed to live other places. And for instance, in 1890, San Francisco had an ordinance ordering the Chinese to move, saying they could only live in certain areas. Fortunately, this ordinance was declared violative of the Constitution, the Burlingame Treaty. So it is believed that racial restrictive covenants began with Asians. We have an 1892 Gandolfo case, which held that racial restrictive covenants were void. However, we know that later on in 1926, the US Supreme Court ruled them enforceable, and then they were not ruled unenforceable until 1948. And racial restrictive covenants are so important because later on, the federal government only allowed federally subsidized lending to white neighborhoods. And your education, your public education is based on property taxes, which are based on property values. So racial restrictive covenants, racial residential segregation, that's key, unfortunately, to our huge racial wealth gaps that survive and are often increasing, even increasing today in the US. During the exclusion era, though, Asians fought back. They resisted. Their merchant associations, their community associations hired attorneys, the best attorneys of the day, that brought cases even to the Supreme Court, and that established precedent that to this day are bedrock principles of our legal system. For instance, the Kwok case, what happened was San Francisco passed an ordinance that on its face appeared neutral. It said, you can't operate a laundry in a wooden building. Fine. However, San Francisco only enforced this ordinance against Chinese laundries. And by the way, why did Chinese operate laundries? Is because they were discriminated against. They could not be employed elsewhere. Fortunately, the US Supreme Court held that even though the statute was facially neutral in its application, it basically violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So again, a groundbreaking case. Another groundbreaking case during the exclusion era is US v. Wong Kim Ark. So we take for granted birthright citizenship. Well, this precedent was set by a Chinese plaintiff. So Wong Kim Ark, he was born in the US. However, his parents were born in China. His parents were ineligible for citizenship. Wong Kim Ark returned after a return trip to China for the second time. He was not allowed back into the US. His case went to the Supreme Court, and the US Supreme Court held that even though his parents were ineligible for citizenship, because he was born in the US, he was a US citizen. Groundbreaking precedent. So eugenics teaching was mainstream science during the exclusion era. So it became popular in the US in the late 1800s and basically remained popular until World War II, when it was used by the Nazis. And so we often don't talk about eugenics theory in the US, but it was mainstream science at the time. It taught there was a racial hierarchy. And at the top, Anglo-Saxons and Northern Europeans were considered morally and intellectually superior. Asians followed, and then Blacks and Hispanics. And so therefore, assimilation meant adopting Anglo-Saxon language, law, religion, and economics. And to this day, the British accent is considered favorable, prestigious. However, Asian accents, no. Even after Chinese were barred from owning property, California alien land laws and land laws in other states were used to prevent Japanese from owning land. And the code of ethics of real estate brokers, realtors, said that it was illegal, unethical for them to basically introduce people, non-whites, into a white neighborhood. So even to this day, there's, even though it's illegal to this day, people are steered by real estate agents into segregated neighborhoods. And eugenics teaching was embedded in our appraisal manuals. So you've heard the term, there goes the neighborhood. So why do we say that? It's because in the appraisal manuals, only properties in white neighborhoods were considered to hold value. And as a result, only white neighborhoods had federally subsidized mortgages. And so the US government drew maps around the country. And today, the red line neighborhoods, the neighborhoods which were not eligible to receive federally subsidized mortgages, are today the same neighborhoods decades later, which are poverty stricken and deprived of resources, because your resources are based on your property taxes, which are based on your appraisal values, which, if they're based on eugenics teaching, will favor white neighborhoods. So speaking of white neighborhoods and public schools, so Asians were not allowed to attend white schools. They were not allowed to live in white neighborhoods. So in 1927, Martha Lum, she was the plaintiff in a case that went up to the US Supreme Court. She was not allowed to attend a white school. She was a straight A student. However, the US Supreme Court held that the Equal Protection Clause was not violated. Now we know that the US Supreme Court changed its tune in 1954 with Brown v. Board of Education. However, Martha brought her case many years before Brown v. Board of Education. Unfortunately, even though the exclusion era officially ended in 1943, Japanese Americans were imprisoned during World War II. 120,000 were forced into prison camps. 2/3 were citizens. They lived in very harsh conditions. They received no due process. They were imprisoned because they were Japanese Americans. It wasn't until 1988 that finally survivors were paid reparations. But they lost everything. They lost their homes, their businesses, and obviously several years of freedom. So we know there was the landmark Supreme Court case of Shelley v. Kramer, which finally ruled that racial restrictive covenants were unenforceable. But few people know that Asian Americans also brought cases fighting racial restrictive covenants. There was a 1948 Tom Amer case. And what happened was, this was about Asian American plaintiffs who were being barred from living in a home in a neighborhood with racial restrictive covenants. This went up to the Supreme Court, but the US Supreme Court remanded this case to be decided in accordance with Shelley v. Kramer. And in 1952, there was another case involving Asian Americans that fought against racial restrictive covenants. In this widely publicized case in the national media, what happened was neighbors voted against this family, this Asian American family, from living in their neighborhood. But the tide was turning. Public officials were denouncing the neighbors who voted against the Chinese American family from living in their neighborhood. So what was turning the tide? Well, this is an example of what I call the conditional inclusion era, which is Asians are now considered models of assimilation. So again, this is very, very odd, right? Asians were excluded from immigration and citizenship because they're considered non-assimilable. And all of a sudden now there's a flip-flop, they're considered models of assimilation. So this label basically was addressing Soviet criticism that the US was racist. And it was also justifying US military intervention in Asia, right? The Korean War, later on the Vietnamese War, and other US military intervention in Asia. But let's examine this. What's assimilation? Remember, the term is not model minority, which appears to be a compliment, but it's not, because it's model assimilated minority. Well, according to this report called Residence and Race, assimilation means you no longer identify with your ethnic group. You're emancipated from minority status. So think about this. If you're a model minority, it means you have to give up your minority identity. You have to assimilate into white culture. Again, this is eugenics theory. But if you give up your white culture, your ethnic identity, your Asian identity, and you adopt white culture, then you can move into white neighborhoods. Well, again, what happens when you move into a white neighborhood? Those are the places with the high property values because the appraisal manuals were based on eugenics theory. You can access public schools with resources. You can access jobs, medical resources, places with healthy food. So today we know that your zip code, unfortunately, determines your access to health and other resources. And the model assimilated minority myth, unfortunately, divides minorities into model and immodel minorities. Again, it's that eugenics theory, and it drives a wedge among minorities. Again, it's part of racial hierarchy theory. So because the model minority myth, conditional inclusion era, is basically another form of racism, it coexists with re-exclusion. And so one event which drew Asian Americans together across the nation in protest was the murder of Vincent Chen. So Vincent lived in Detroit, Michigan, and he was brutally beaten by auto workers in 1982. He was beaten with a baseball bat. He was celebrating his bachelor's party. He was going to get married in a few days. And unfortunately, a brawl developed. Racial slurs were thrown at Vincent. He was murdered. But his murderers, who were auto workers, never served any time in prison. The trial judge basically said, these men don't deserve to go to prison. And so, unfortunately, this echoes the history of the 1800s. Remember the Chinese miners who were brutally attacked by tax collectors because non-whites could not testify in court. You could get away with murder. So this happened in 1982. And that's a picture of Vincent's mom grieving. Very, very sad incident in Asian American legal history. Also, sadly, re-exclusion, right? So against South Asians, after the 9/11 attacks, South Asians are racially profiled and to this day suffer discrimination for being South Asians and being associated with terrorist acts. What are other examples of re-exclusion? Well, you may have heard about lawsuits against elite institutions which have perceived quotas against Asian Americans. So no matter how many Asian Americans apply, only 20% are accepted at certain elite institutions. However, these lawsuits are, again, dividing minority groups because of attacks on affirmative action. So again, it's part of racial hierarchy theory where minority groups are divided and a wedge is drawn among them. Another example of re-exclusion is the FBA China initiative. So Chinese American scientists are racially profiled and they would be arrested. They would be accused of spying. Their careers would be ruined. However, they were not, evidence was never found of spying. This initiative officially ended in 2022, but it has ruined the careers of many Chinese American scientists. And bamboo ceiling. So for instance, in law firms, in corporations, you have Asians in the lower ranks. You have Asian associates, but not very few Asian partners. You have Asian employees, but very few Asians in the C-suite. Why is this? Well, you have stereotypes, which date from the 1800s and even before then. Asians are considered good at math, good technical workers, but they don't have leadership skills. That's a stereotype. So therefore, they're not promoted into positions of management and leadership in corporations and in law firms. And what else do you have today? you have white flight. So you have Asians moving into a previously white suburb. And then you have non-Asian parents very concerned. They're saying, well, these Asians are good at math. My children are not going to do very well if they're competing against Asians. So then they move to the next neighborhood. So white flight from Asian suburbs. And then the coronavirus pandemic, violence against Asians. Again, because of eugenics theory, Asians are considered one group. It doesn't matter if you're from Thailand, you're from Burma, you're from the Philippines, your ancestry is Chinese, Korean, Japanese. It doesn't matter what your ancestry is. Brutal attacks and murders. And bystanders not helping. You have people being stabbed on subways and people turning away. Filipina beaten, and security guards don't help her. So we're reliving the violence of the 1800s during the Exclusion Era. In addition, we have verbal abuse, being coughed at, spit at, not being served, shunned by rideshare drivers, decline in business patronage. Filipina nurses suffering disproportionate deaths of all the nurses who have died during the pandemic, and also the Pacific Islander community suffering disproportionate deaths during the coronavirus pandemic as well. We do have Kamala Harris being elected as our first Asian American vice president. So what's our conclusion? Well, unfortunately, anti-Asian racism is part of a global picture of perceived economic, religious, and cultural conflict and competition. In the US, we see four main eras of pre-exclusion, exclusion, conditional inclusion, and re-exclusion. However, we see Asians making huge contributions to the US economy and to our culture, and asserting their legal rights, resisting discrimination and violence through district associations, community groups, and attorneys. By reviewing this history, we can understand current events, but also by reviewing this history, we find that we have to stop the vicious cycle of exclusion, conditional inclusion, and re-exclusion. We have to stop racial hierarchy theory and accept all as legitimate US members of society. Not saying that you're only included if you assimilate, if you give up your ethnic identity. So we must work for harmony and justice for all. We must tell our history of resistance and resilience. We can overcome anti-Asian racism and other racism, because anti-Asian racism is part of the larger picture of racial hierarchy theory. Thank you.
I want to thank Professor Sito so much for that very informative presentation via video. Again, she will be available live over the phone to be able to answer questions during the Q&A. Now we are moving into our presentation by Attorney Christopher Kwok, who is a mediator and arbitrator with JAMS. He specializes in labor and employment law. He has worked as the ADR coordinator at the U.S. Equal Opportunity Employment Commission in the New York District Office. He's managed mediators in New York, Newark, Buffalo, and Boston offices, and has personally mediated thousands of cases over the course of his career. Mr. Kwok is active in the field as a trainer, lecturer, and a writer. Attorney Kwok was also the founding co-chair of the Labor and Employment Committee at the Asian American Bar Association of New York, and the founding co-chair of the Dispute Resolution Committee at the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association. He received his bachelor's from Cornell University with a major in government and a minor in Asian American studies, and his JD from UCLA Law School, where he was an editor of the American Pacific Islander Law Journal. We're happy to have you with us today, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. I'm going to thank all the organizers, the Onondaga County Bar Association, and the law firm Von Schoenig and King. And it is, without a doubt, the most organized CLE I've ever been on. And so, the preparation has been immense and really impressive. And I'm really glad to follow my friend and colleague, Professor Sito. That was a wonderful historical backdrop. And I learned a lot from that too, even though I teach that subject myself. One of the most interesting things is, of course, America was, one of the leading proponents of eugenics. And Germany, Nazi Germany, adopted many of those ideas and put them to really, sort of led them to really sort of horrific ends, as we know, for those of us that know history. And because America led the European and the Asian effort in the Asian theaters against the Axis. The mythology of the story was that we defeated all those things because we're opposite to all those things, including eugenics theory. But America, of course, had to deal with its legacy, of which it actually created many of those theories and was a leading center of it. So it's one of the reasons why I think it's difficult in America post World War II and also in our contemporary society of sort of the things that we tell ourselves and the things that we don't when we try to sort of reformat our society into what we all are trying to build, which is an equitable society. So I'm very glad to be here. I'm here on behalf of the Asian American Bar Association of New York. Last year in February of 2021, we put out a report right during sort of the high crest of anti-Asian violence. We had been working on this report all through 2020. We're all stuck at home, and we put it out when we thought it would be forgotten. Of course, in 2021, February 2021, nothing was forgotten. We were about to hit the high note of that report. So, that report is, something that I certainly want to share with you. This is the report from 2021. I also wanted to tell you that we have another report, a follow-up report to that's going to be coming out. Right now, we have the target date of May 23rd. We would have loved to have it for you, but we don't. But we will certainly email every single person that has registered for this program that report when it does come out. But before it comes out, love to share with you some of our findings and our suggestions from it. A very big overview. I don't want to, say we're going to get into the details because it's a big paper. But there are things that we want to be able to share with you. So let's see if I can pull it up and then we can get right into it. Okay. Hold on. All right, here we go. So, all right, and the report that's forthcoming is called Endless Tide, the continuing struggle to overcome anti-Asian hate in New York. We're focused on New York because we are AAPI, right? So just to give you some sort of important markers along the way, in 2020, NYPD announced as the Asian Hate Crimes Task Force. It's a volunteer effort in the sense of everyone who's working there is part of the NYPD, is an employee, has a full-time role, but has agreed to help with an Asian Hate Crimes Task Force when it's called for. And if you go forward in 2021, you'll see the 6 Asian women that were killed in the spa in Atlanta. Those have not been designated, hate crimes in those jurisdictions. But many, if not all of the Asian American community believe that on some level they are indeed hate crimes. In May of 2021, President Biden signed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act and an executive order reestablishing the AAPI, the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. That particular statute is given to the DOJ to review and to decide how best to implement the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. And through 2021, we were slowly coming out and coming back in to Asian hate crimes, and we were thinking maybe through the year it would burn itself off. But in 2022 in New York City, or as we headed into 2022, we saw a whole series of events in which the victims of the crimes were Asian or Asian American. Yao Pen Ma was collecting cans near his home in Upper Manhattan, and he was attacked and suffered serious head injuries. And he was in a coma for a very long time and then passed away in December of 21. Michelle Go, a student from California who came to New York for graduate school and was heading downtown at Times Square, was pushed to her violent death, in January of that year. Shortly thereafter, a month after, another Asian American woman was followed home and then killed in her apartment in a brutal fashion. So those things really, really affected the Asian American community. And just to pull back the lens a little bit, from March of 2020 to December of 21, there were over 10,000 hate incidents against AAPI persons around the country. Okay. And if you look at sort of New York and what that means is New York is one of the centers of the large increases, both in complaints and arrests for hate crimes. So you see there, the blue is 2020 and the orange is 2021. And so you see that NYPD's report an over 300% increase in anti-AAPI hate crimes in New York from 2020, when we were all locked up in our homes, to 2021. This comes within a general increase in uptick of hate crimes against, everyone, including Jews. And so it is part of a larger increase in sort of hate crimes. So, if you break down the first 3 quarters of 2021, you see the graphs on the left. You'll see that in March and April, you'll have, a large percentage, and that's really sort of at the center of the spotlight. And then it trends down as 2021 progresses. If you look at the other circle that we have here, it shows you that most of the incidents are happening in Manhattan, followed closely by Queens and Brooklyn. And of course, Manhattan is the center of New York City. It's the center of business, and there's a lot of activity going on there. So Manhattan is really at the center of that. In Queens and Brooklyn are largely residential, boroughs, and they have large Chinese or Asian populations in those areas. Okay. And if you look at the precincts by which these are happening, you see the red spots being where these incidents occurred. The first, by far, the 14th precinct is Midtown, and the 5th precinct is Chinatown. So you'll see that it's not necessarily relegated to Chinatown in Manhattan, it's relegated to Midtown, which is just where a lot of stuff is concentrated. And if you want to know, hey, what kind of crimes for these, assault, unfortunately, is close to 60% of all of these crimes, followed closely by physical harassment, and a large part also composed of verbal harassment. And when you get the report in your hands at the end of the month, you'll have all these graphs and deeper analysis available to you. I wanted to go into one case to illustrate some of the issues that we saw with the prosecution of hate crimes in New York City. So in February of 2021, Patrick Mateo, after getting into an argument with the Chinese woman behind him, shoved her into the news. You see those row of newsstands, and she cut her head open on the newsstand, and there were over 21 stitches on her forehead. And it was just sort of, he was given essentially a very simple, charge. It was almost like a parking ticket, right? But later on, he, was interviewed by a New York Times reporter who he responded to in a text and was saying, basically he had said, "This is not China, give me some room, this coronavirus." And they got into an argument there, and he just sort of sent her flying to the ground. And despite the fact that this case, when it happened, because it was captured on video, because there was some stars that had tweeted about it, had some attention, and then he himself essentially admitted some anti-Asian remarks, it was not treated by the Queen's DA, Melissa Katz, as a hate crime. And Ebony decided to advocate for this. And we had a really difficult time with the district attorney with this case, because they just kind of refused to see it, and we thought we identified a difficulty in identifying hate crimes against Asian Americans. And I think it really goes back to the title, Invisible Under the Law. It goes back to some of the history that Professor Sito has talked about, where there was a racial hierarchy, and then with the racial hierarchy of whites being, with Asians being below whites, but above blacks. And so, given the era of model assimilative minority, Asians are considered to be essentially honorary whites, right? And therefore, the issue of race when it comes to Asian Americans, highly, complex. And a lot of people don't really know how to think about it and don't really know how to talk about it. So let me conclude with, what we think should happen. And I'm not going to go through all of them. They are all explored in depth in our forthcoming paper. But we found that public hate crime data is really difficult to access as a non-expert. And so that, improving access to it, improving how it's put together should be the first priority of government. Number two, we think the community as a victim, that is the Asian American community, when an Asian person is attacked or suffers a crime, not only does that person suffer the crime, the community suffers the crime. And we think that the community should be treated as an investigative partner because it wants to help. We also recommend some reforms to the hate crime laws in ways that we think will still protect the rights of the accused, but make it easier so that individuals like the DAs will be able to recognize them and not be hesitant in sort of bringing forth these charges, because they are really, this kind of time, the Asian American community is really exhausted and quite honestly feels terrorized in many ways. We think that not every anti-Asian hate crime is going to end in jail. So we think that there should be anti-bias programming in diversion programs. So, in courts, not everyone's going to go to jail. They're going to be sent to counseling and things like that. And we think that counseling and training should have Asian American related topics and themes. And let's see. And finally, we supported Governor Hochul's second round of bail reforms, which made hate crimes eligible for bail, in which they previously were not. So there's all sorts of things that we can do that are statute, that are about interpretation, that are about the access of police to linguistic resources so they can talk to immigrant communities in language during the investigation. We think those kind of things will make this era much better. So let's see. All right, so I think with that, I'm going to stop my portion. And I think I'm going to also give you the CLD code. And the CLD code is civility. So hopefully we will enter an era of civility very soon from another era of increased violence and frustration and anger into an era of civility. So civility is the CLD code. Thanks very much.
Okay, I am going to say thank you again, Chris. That was wonderful. Our two presenters really were incredibly informative, and we are so thankful that you were able to and willing to spend a beautiful Thursday evening providing that information for us. Again, I know that the CLE code was mentioned. I want to remind you that if you are seeking MCLE credit, please fill out your affirmation with that code, sign the form, and return it to the Onondaga County Bar Association within 48 hours. You can email it, you can fax it. There's a lot of options there. Just make sure that you get that back. At this point, before we move into our panel, we do, and I will say one more time, the CLE code is civility. At this point, we are going to move into our panel, and before that time, we wanted to allow folks who are here to be able to participate and identify themselves and see, what their ethnicity is among our very broad range of different Asian identities. Yes, Nick, that is the course code. So to be able to participate in this poll, what we need you to do is enter the number 22333 into your text messages, and then you are going to text the word Elke Sorensen 012. You can use your phone for that, or in the chat, there is a link that you can go online and participate in the poll. And then once you are connected, you're going to select what your identity is, and it should pop up on the screen for us.
So I encourage, I'm Lillian Moy, I'm going to be with you for the next hour or so. If you are if you have multiple identities listed here on the screen, pick the ones that apply to you. And we'll see if this poll is really designed to illustrate the diversity of our community. Let's see, how can I turn my camera on?
Lily, I can't turn my camera on either, so the hosts have to disable it.
Colleen, man.
Oh, let me see. Hold on. Let me see what I can do here. I don't know. I don't think I'm a host. I think that it might be Carrie or Jeff. Let me see if I can do it.
Okay, start my video. I will.
Okay.
Hi.
Lissa, I'm gonna respond quickly. Lissa, the CLE form should have been emailed to you with your registration. Go ahead.
You want to introduce this part of this group?
Yep, that is our next piece. So for our panel, we have we have a moderator, and then we have two local Syracuse panelists. So Lillian, who you have heard so far today, bringing our poll into play. She is the executive director of the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York. Ms. Moy has been the executive director of the Legal Aid Society there since 1995. She's a graduate of Hunter College in CUNY and a 1981 graduate of Boston University School of Law. She has amazing affiliations. I will encourage you to read her full bio. But
I wouldn't bother, yeah.
So in summary, she's a nationally recognized leader, writer, and trainer in civil legal aid community, and has extensive experience focusing on diverse communities. Our two panelists from Syracuse are Ty No Shaw. Ty came to the United States in 1982 at age 10. Again, please read his bio because he has a beautiful way of explaining his experience and what he has gone through. And now he is in Syracuse as a business leader and a community engaged activist. He serves the Vietnamese community as their vice president in Syracuse. He has assisted the Vietnamese community of Syracuse in formalizing its community association. He also serves as a chair of World Refugee Day and leads the CNY Blessing Box, which currently operates a weekly food pantry that focuses on the needs of new Americans and refugees on the north side of Syracuse. Again, really extensive bios, please check that out. And then our second panelist is Jai Subedi. He's the Director of Business Development at True Care Connections since May 2021. Previously, he was the company's CEO and works in home healthcare and home healthcare management organization. It is a 100% minority-owned business founded by former refugees who saw a need for a healthcare agency that specialized in serving refugee and immigrant populations because of their unique healthcare situations and barriers accessing care due to language and culture. Mr. Subedi was born in Bhutan and became a refugee at the age of 12. So we are really honored to have folks here tonight. We're gonna be able to focus on our panelists. And again, please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A and take it away.
So I'm getting the message that my internet is unstable. So I am going to figure out how I can turn my camera off, which is what I usually do when my internet is unstable. And Jai and Teo, I wanted to start by asking if what you had heard in the last hour that rings true for you today, that you know is happening today. We heard from Mary about the experience of Asians being re-excluded from American society, and from Chris about the huge number of AAPI hate crimes, focused especially in New York City. So did you hear anything today that rings true for you? I'm sorry, did you hear anything in this last couple hour that rings true for you now? Did we lose Mary, or is she still on by phone?
She's on by phone.
I see her. Okay, great. Jay or Ty?
Thank you again for this beautiful evening, and thank you all of you who are joining here tonight. And this is a great opportunity for us as an Asian community to say something what is happening in New York State and in our local communities. And I think we need more of those platforms and sessions so that we can educate more people about the AAPI community in our local areas. So the Chris data, absolutely, that is much helpful to myself as well, because I'm pretty new. I have been in this country just 12 years now. And this is so much learning, but as going back to what is happening right now and what happened since the COVID began we cannot deny any fact that's not happening in our local area. But there are people, I mean, when I was listening all of those sessions, the people who are living in New York City is way much different than where we are living in upstate New York. We have a large resettlement agencies across the upstate, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, and those resettle agencies, people where they come from, they are coming from very rural part of the world. They have no internet, no education, nothing knows, and many of those incidents were not reported, and nobody heard about it. And I think that this is really good sessions that we can take this educational piece to our local communities. And I think we have more to say, and Ty can add more, and we'll be talking more about that.
Ty?
Thank you. So Chris, information is great. It's a national news. Everyone saw that if they watch. But, most of my community, as the Vietnamese community, most of us, we work until 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. So we miss the 6 o'clock news, and we be in bed, by 10 o'clock already. So we really don't see a lot of this news. We rely on community leaders to pass down the information like this, or the elder that they watch and they go home and they tell a story. Most of our community communication through the seniors. We respect the elder, and the seniors saw the news, and they go home, they have dinner, and they talk about it as a family table. But a lot of these crimes, beside on national news, are locally news here. For those who are attorney in Syracuse, you're not even aware of that. A lot of the Vietnamese community are being targeted. There's a few things that are happening. Is most of the Vietnamese community, they call mattress money. They keep their money at home and their jewelry and stuff like that at home or in their purses. And most of the entity, they know that, and they survey in our community. Majority of our community here in Syracuse are a nail salon owner, right? And they know the system. What they do, they target them, and the reason most of our community don't report them because it's a cash business, right? So if they are doing cash and they're hiding their cash, and now if somebody robbed them for XYZ amount, $10,000, whatever it is, now how they're going to justify it? And they fear from the IRS will go after them. So a lot of these are hidden, and they're afraid to go. And number two, the language barrier where they don't know how to communicate. Most of them, they stay in the third and fourth generation, but still in our culture, we fear of the law and police officer. And that's something that we have to keep that in mind and continue educate them that how to use the law, and the laws are friendly, and the police officer are friendly. In our mind, still, we don't have that ingrained in our brain for thousands of years. So that's what I need with the help us.
Hi, the distrust of law enforcement, is it fear of law enforcement in general? Is it disconnect with your local law enforcement because they don't respond? Or what is it that makes people afraid to report?
Well, yeah, first one I respond is the law enforcement not responding. That's number one.
Right.
Okay. And number two, if they were to respond, then there's no follow-up. If they continue calling and say, hey, what the result on this? And there's no follow-up with the law, with the police, the police department. So therefore, what do we do when we don't understand something? We let it go, right? One after another. After a while, the community main word is they don't care. So therefore, we don't report them because it's not matter. And that's the problem. And plus, when they go to the system, let's say they did prosecute somebody, and that the law system, it months after months after months, these people don't have the time to do that because they're so busy working. They can't afford to take time off to go to court. So that's a lot of that.
Can I add something on that note?
Sure, Jay.
So the police department, or the law enforcement department doesn't have much of the AAPI cultural competency part. So it's a general patrol officers who comes to the home when 911 calls are made. So those hate crimes are not categorized and not reported. It just counted as in general 911 call. So when they come to the homes, so if somebody have a knife or something happened, if there's nothing they see, then okay, you guys are good. So close the door, slip. So that kind of things. And the other part that Ty was mentioning, and what happens in East Vietnamese communities also happening in my Bhutanese community. Many of the homes where they targeted, they stole the money, they took the jewelries, and they went home by home and we had several nights that the Bhutanese Nepali family has been targeted and took the stuff. I don't know. So, but many of the, as we are talking about the Asian hate crimes, yes, there are many incidents that happened, but as we are talking about the law enforcement responding, there's no cultural competency and training specific to that department. So police itself doesn't categorize whether it is reported in that direction. And we have a many cultural sensibility. We come from the war. We come from very rural part of the world where the police comes, we have to hide. Like my dad used to go to forest to save his life from the police for a month. So when a month passed by, we couldn't able to tolerate like that in our life, then we fled the country. So this is where we came from, the background. And still, when we see the police, we shock. They are fear. And we live in a very wide suburban area where my parents are locked up in a home and they're afraid to go out and talk because not many people are, and I know there's a lot of language issue and cultural issues, but yes, there exist in our society, is in our local communities, but there are many which are not reported.
Quick question, are there any Asian local law enforcement members, officers? Number one, and we got a question from a very sympathetic district attorney, would it help if there was an Asian DA? And obviously not per se, right? Not automatically, but an Asian with cultural competence and humility. Ty?
I'll address that. Thank you for the question.
Sure.
Here's the hardest part for to just remind people, or the attorney and the DA on this call. Remember, Central New York is very small. A lot of people don't know because every time they say upstate, they're thinking of us as Albany. We are 3 hours away from Albany, and we are small. Central New York is a small Onondaga County, so keep that in mind. And number two, the problem we have here, and I hope some of the participants are the lawyer here in Onondaga County. We don't have representation, not just an attorney who speak Vietnamese or whatever many language we have here. We don't even have somebody who represent the culture beside organizations and employees. What we need to do is what we need most in now. If we need somebody that look like us, that can be the voice for us without being the police officer or be a lawyer or whatever it is. We need a common person that we can trust, that we can go to. That's what we're missing. That's what we need here the most, for somebody confident enough to go to them with big, small issues. That's what we need.
Chris, did you want to insert what you said in the chat?
Yeah, that's one of the issues we've been talking about within New York. So New York City, right? Again, you might think, each DA's office has got tons of Asians and in language investigators, and it's just not the case. And it really depends. So let's look at Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, as you all know, New York City, 5 boroughs, 5 elected DAs, which means depending on where you live or where incidents happen, you're going to have really different experiences. Staten Island is the most suburban borough. It's the whitest borough, maybe most like upstate New York, where we're talking about, right? Not a lot of incidents. So, having in-language Asian investigators, DAs, it'll be nice, but maybe not the best use of resources, right? But in Manhattan and Queens, those are slowly coming along, but they are still relatively junior DAs, not in sort of, they are the DAs that are like, tell me what to do, and they're just kind of effectuating things. They're not the ones in management or sort of directing how these things are happening. And so it's still an issue. DA offices, particularly Bragg, they're coming in, they know the issue. Bragg is a new breath of fresh air in Manhattan. And, we look forward to that. We have a direct line. We have a relationship with Bragg in a way that we certainly didn't have with the previous DA in Manhattan. So, everything is happening really slowly. Yeah.
And even more slowly upstate, to be sure. Okay. Because it's just harder and there are not as many Asian anybody's, right? Asian lawyers, Asian translators, interpreters, Asian investigators, just not as many. So Ty and Jay, today you're the voice of the AAPI community in Central New York. Knowing what you know about the underreporting of hate crimes, the fear of retaliation, the disconnect with local law enforcement, what would you like lawyers to do? Not DAs, just lawyers, not necessarily Asian, but maybe pro bono lawyers at law firms or somewhere in the community, or at Hiscox Legal Aid or Legal Services of Central New York. What would you like to see us do?
Ty, you want to go?
Yeah. So I think the first piece, we highly recommend ourselves as educational piece. If we have an opportunity to take that educational piece to our Asian community, that would be beneficial. At the same time, their rights and responsibilities, because as I said before, because of the cultural aspects and fear from the backcountry, many of the cases are not reported, and they are fear of the police to come to their home, and they are fear, as Ty said, they are fear to go to the court, because to be in the court they feel that they will be arrested and put into the jail. So those things need to be addressed, and use civic engagement and educational piece would be helpful, number one. Number two, we need to work very closely with the local government as well as the law enforcement. Make sure we are the citizen of this country. We live in a neighborhood, and we have a support from law enforcement and the local government. Number three, I think the diversity speaks itself. We need a diversity in our local government, in the law firms, as well as in the government office, so that we have a people to go. We have a people to speak for us. And we can't be always in a 911 call. I mean, 24/7 people all the time. People come to us like after a year that I have been insulted because I look like an Asian guy. And because of this, I was knocked down. So those things are really critically important, and I think Ty can add more on that. So Ty, you can go.
All right, thank you. And also we need more education to educate our people on what you guys do. That there are more service. Legal aid here is free. They bombarded. Making a call. Go to a primes for many primes. Our people just hang up because they give up. They're confused. I've been here for 40 years. Okay, I came to America in 1982. I'm making phone call for some of my people. I'm sitting here. I had to go to all these primes. After 5-10 primes and wait for half an hour, I give up too. You know, that's the thing. We need to get easy access to our people, and the language, somehow a language support. I know Onondaga County have a 211, and 211 too. They also bombarded with so many calls. They don't have enough to help out. So if for the question, what can you guys do to engage to our community? Now, we're not just asking for the Asian community. The AAPI is a huge community for the islanders, but not just the islanders. We fight for the Africans who are here too. And they are suffer worse than my community, because we've been here since 1979. These people know a lot less. They come here 90 days. They got support from an agency. After 90 days, they survive by themselves. What do they do after that? You know, and they don't understand the law. So what I'm saying is, we need more engagement with the law. We can't just say free legal aid. If you make a phone call to them, ask them.
Sorry, Colleen, my internet is terrible. Can you pick it up?
Yeah, the questioning.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'll try to leap back in if it improves. Go ahead.
Sure. Yep. Continue, Jai. Ty. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying is if we need more to get more attorney to do pro bono to get to know our community. That's what we need. If you asking the question, what can you guys do for us? I know you have so many cases, the new law since the COVID. So let's help us with small things. And that's what we need. It's right now the huge part of the diversity part. When we talk about diversity, everyone thinks it's black and brown, and everyone keeps saying black and brown. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not black nor brown. If you want to stigmatize me, Vietnamese people or Southeast Asian, we are yellow, right? Chai is considered red. So to me, that's M&Ms. Let's look at more than just black and brown. Because if you guys talk about diversity, black and brown, we are missing the boat here. The Asian people, I know, no pun intended, but now the Asian and the Hindi, we're not even in the equation. So we need more hand-on, come see us and meet with our community, meet with our leaders. What is it that you offer? And sit down, break bread with us and be with give us the equation or what it is that you're offering. Sorry, I'm back there.
Ty, along those lines, are you what other kind of solidarity communities are you involved in? I know World Refugee Day. Are you connected with Black Lives Matters or other local similar groups around those issues?
Yes. Right now, I'm connected with 100 Black Men Club. I'm also connected to NAACP. I'm on the board now for regarding voting, how we get our people out to vote, and how we get the new American vote counts and what it is that we can educate our people to vote. Right? I'm hoping. I'm doing so many different community. Like I do World Refugee Day, right? We do the Vietnamese event. We do Northside Festival. We're trying to bring all these people together, give them a voice. That's we working at New American Forum. Our group make up of 10 community leaders speaking 24 languages, and our mission is a refugee empowering refugee. But it's unlimited what we can do. We need more help from you guys. And I always say, I call it a magic book or magic numbers. We don't want privilege for us. We want able to connect it with you. We have certain issues that we can make phone call to you. We don't expect you to solve the problem for us, but somewhat when someone comes to us, we're able to make a phone call and give them an answer. Here, what the next step is. Otherwise, when we make phone calls the same as them, what's the difference? We have to wait to the prime. We need, as leaders, give us New American credibility is that we can make a phone call to someone and say, hey, here are the next step. Here are these people you can call. And that's why I'm doing my best for connecting, bridge building with many American Latino community. I'm part of that. We do a Winter Fest. We do International Food Festival. We're trying to get involved in many community that fall into the cracks that we're trying to give and engage.
There's a question in the chat that ties into that a little bit. Can professionals and neighbors watch for and advocate for competent language services when they see interactions where government officials are not using interpreters?
I think so. I mean, as any engaged citizen, you can advocate for that. But I worked for the federal government for 15 years, and we had a language access hotline. And sometimes that was funded, sometimes that wasn't, which means that we had access to that sometimes and sometimes we didn't. But I will tell you that as someone who cares deeply about this issue and worked in the federal government, serving publicly facing the public, if you don't speak English, it's difficult to access any governmental services, period, if next to impossible. To take this back to interactions with police, when you speak accented English, or your English is not, sort of colloquial, or you know how to do it, it's very difficult to interact with the police, and you will be treated by the police in a different way. You will be treated poorly. It has been my experience with the newer immigrants in my church, where I've sort of heard stories and experienced that. It's a big issue, and it's a difficult one. particularly in upstate New York, where you have a really sort of less diverse population. That's not a problem, but then you have really new immigrants like the refugees, and they come in with very little resources, very little education. So it's a real big challenge for everybody. And it's not about sort of, I think it's recognizing the challenges and deciding where to put those resources in a way that won't be wasted. Because you can throw tons of money at stuff, but if you don't deploy it in a way that's smart, that's capable, and that's flexible, then it might be wasted. So these are big problems. But one of the things is to think about using universities, which is a big, sit in many upstate towns in a way that can serve, because there's just conservators of such interesting people and knowledge and languages that you wouldn't think usually maybe in an upstate town, but maybe using those resources to help government deal with new populations, service them, and might be a way. Think of using the things that are there to help the people that are living there, just new inventive ways.
There is a question in the Q&A. Are you guys connected with Andrew Yang? He has some AAPI initiatives.
Sure. So, so just very quickly, Andrew Yang came to prominence and not as an Asian American politician. He ran as, sort of like, this is my, the paycheck, right? You're gonna get paid to live because the AI is gonna take over the world, so we better pay people. And he ran for his presidential campaign on that way, not as an Asian American. When he ran for New York mayor, he much more reached into the Asian American population to help his run. And he really shifted his rhetoric for the first time there. And beginning from there, although he lost, he created a lot of excitement within the Asian American community, although he really didn't reach into that community until the mayoral run. And since then, his wife has actually been more active in local Asian American politics. But sure, we know him and he's connected, and he's kind of like, I think he's kind of deciding where he wants to be, but it's not like he's a leader, a big leader right now, or he's got a role.
Chris, you're brutal. Okay.
I'm sorry. Is that mean?
No. It wasn't. I hate Ty and Jay. I wanted to ask you if you'd had any interactions with law students from Syracuse. I don't know. Can you hear me okay? Because I wasn't sure if now was the time.
We tried, when NAF began.
Okay.
We trying to reach out to NAF, to the law student, to help us give us our 501c4. We tried for 3-4 years, not successful. We have to hire an attorney to do that. So the answer is no. Our arms are not long enough. This is why in Central New York, we need a representation. We need somebody look like us and sound like us that can represent us. Right now, leaders like us, we work all day long and we do our best to connect and sit on this panel with you guys. We have a life to run too. We don't just, this is not what we do for a living. We need somebody that just mainly look out for the new Americans and the Asian, the AAPI represented in Central New York. So that person's job is to reach out and connect all the dots. Because right now we don't have any dots. Chai and I, we run the World Refugee Day and the New American Forum. We're doing the best that we can. Everybody else busy working too. That's what we need in Central New York. If you guys can do something, get a panel, talk to the mayor, whatever it is, we need representation. Someone represent the minority for the AAPI here in Central New York, so we can connect all the dots.
And with that being said, I think we as I said at the first opening, we have a large community here in Central New York. So 2-3 resettlement agencies in Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo has 4. So the large part of Asian communities are resettled and live in upstate New York and in Central New York. And as I said, most of the people who have not gone through their educational background in their life, and those people never come out and speak the truth of what they have been going through. And as I said, Ty and myself, we always have to be 24/7 people working in the community and run our own life. So it is getting more worse. So I mean, if there is a way that the Bar Association or any other SU can provide this support, I think that would be highly welcome, and we need that support. Thank you.
Mary, I'm sorry, I'm in for a minute. Mary, I don't know if you can see a role for law students from Syracuse in this community struggle for attention and for resources and guidance.
Yes, I do. Actually, AAPI law student enrollment, unfortunately, has been dropping over the past several years. And so we're actually in a crisis among all minority groups, and the majority AAPI law student enrollment has dropped the most. And but the good news is that we do have AAPI law students enrolled. We have a group called APASA, which is part of the National Organization of Asian Pacific American Law Students. We have a local chapter. And so this year we have a very, very enthusiastic group, and I can definitely approach the leadership about this. I think we can definitely make connections with Ty and Jay, and I'm very hopeful that we can connect in the months to come on these issues.
I think that's great news. One thing that worked well for a while in Albany was law students and then college students who had language ability, and they had actually enrolled language faculty at the university to kind of test the competency of the bilingual students, so that there was some assurance that the students were sufficiently bilingual to serve as interpreters, and that might take a little bit of the load off Ty and Jai, right? I mean, it sounds like that you two are personally and your friends are carrying a lot of this load. So trying to enroll volunteers in the college and law school community, I think could really work well. I'm always a little hesitant because of the question of, can you really, are you really able to interpret, right? And so because you don't want someone who cannot speak well enough, but there's the experience in Albany was that it worked okay. Okay, I gotta stop. It looks like I'm getting the message to stop. So Colleen, can I turn to you again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, internet is tough. I wanted to point out one thing that is probably a blatant plug for my organization, although it doesn't exist here in Syracuse. It exists in New York City, which is a land of many resources. But there is an organization called Legal Hand, which has trained non-lawyer community volunteers who work on issues that they are able to work on as non-lawyers, right? We know that lawyers, that people cannot offer legal representation or offer legal advice without being lawyers, but there are certain areas where folks are able to do that in something called this Legal Hand project. So it's almost interesting to think about, like, could we figure out a way to create something like that here in Syracuse, or provide something like that? Because we know that it is also very hard to get attorney volunteers. It's hard to get volunteers in general. So that's just something that I was thinking about. And I see that Carrie or Jeff put in the chat the link to the New American group that Ty and Jai lead. Other questions or comments from the group at large, or feedback, thoughts?
Can I add one more? Can I add one more for you? How about if for the Lawyer Bars Association, whatever, what if you know how today the people who participate, they get 1 CE credit, right? And what if the whole Onondaga County Association will have something that, if they can reach out to the New American, do their volunteer time and get certain credits to get their yearly quota met, maybe 2-3 hours a week, whatever it is. Just a thought.
So,
yeah, no, that's a great idea, Ty. And there is in New York State a pro bono requirement for law students before they become lawyers to have some pro bono experience. It's a challenge for law students. because they're busy and then they don't always know where to find pro bono work. And I know that because in the last 6 or 7 years, AAPI has been running a pro bono clinic. And it started slowly. I mean, we used to go and see 1 or 2 people per night. We just hang out, and no one would come in. But 5 or 6 years in, we've gotten things a little bit sort of going. And as Colleen was talking, and I was thinking of my colleague, Professor Cito, I'm wondering, can we do this virtually? Can we, use platforms like Zoom through clinics with Syracuse law students, APALSTA, and those that are interested? You don't have to be Asian to serve in this. Can we use Zoom? And if people want this, they can set up an appointment, and so we can use our technology. We can use these students who need pro bono hours and knit them together. So that's something that I think that Professor Cito and I will talk more about, because we've been talking about other initiatives that we want to do for New York State law schools, and this could be very well one of them when we get a chance to talk.
Colin, I just
so absolutely, I want to chime in and say that my colleague. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So my experience and Thai experience. So we have been serving in the police department as an advisory council for the chief. And prior to that, I was an advisory member for the chief local, as well as served in the city government as a volunteer citizens council member for previous administration, as well as in the mayor administration. So our experience is that we learn a lot from the government side. And now if any issues not regarding the hate crimes, as well as the other issues that we can able to raise the voice, we have a people to call in a government wise. So our experience is that will help us some level of addressing some of the issues in the communities. But my point here is also from the legal side, we do not know, as Colin mentioned before, the legal hand, right? So that would definitely help us to lead us at least to categorize the issue and navigate the people to go into the law firms or into the court, take the issues into the court. So I think that program definitely help us, and we are much interested in our New American Forum too, because we have leaders from many nations, and it's not only the AAPI community, it's also other immigrants and refugees community that they are going through the same level of problem. So definitely we welcome that project. And there's another questions in the chat. I think Colin can go through that one. I'm happy to answer that some level.
Lillian, I'm going to save that one for 1 second, Jai. Lillian, did you have something that you wanted to add on to Chris's comment before I get to the question in the chat?
All right, I'll try this for a moment. I don't know how long it's going to last. My colleague, Paul Lupia, who runs the Legal Aid Society of Mid-New York, noted that legal services providers can give those CLE credits for a pro bono service to volunteers of any nationality and skill. So lawyers who are listening, then of course the Onondaga County Bar also has its own great pro bono program. You have options, and they provide training and CLE credit and other resources to pro bono volunteers. I wanted to quickly speak to Legal Hand, Colleen, because this is my Legal Aid Society in Albany and Schenectady counties is working with a local community agency that is running, I think, the first upstate virtual Legal Hand program. And it's new, so far so good. And Ty and Jay, what's great about the Legal Hand program is that if you can convince them that your community agency is capable of running a legal hand, there is money available to staff it. It's not legal services. It is, as Colleen said, it's legal information given by people in the community just like you, who are not lawyers, but who are thoughtful and experienced and can see an issue and make a connection. It would be very unusual, I think, for them to go for a program that delivers services in a language other than English. But I think you could make a compelling narrative given like the union of all refugees in your community. So happy to talk to you about that offline, is that the expression, offline, and have a conversation about that resource. I know, I just want to bring it back real quickly to, oh, okay, yes, is that Jeff posting about the volunteer lawyers project of Central New York. And Ty and Jay, you should definitely get on their website because they offer services to all of your local Syracuse, Central New York area lawyers who want to do pro bono. Sorry, go ahead.
There is, Lillian, just about VLP, there is a site that meets once a week, a Talk to a Lawyer clinic that meets on the north side, I think on Butternut at one of the libraries for an hour. So people can stop in and get legal advice and counsel during that hour. And there will be an attorney that staffs that.
Is that one of is that an immigration clinic? Because I think they have an immigration clinic too.
They do now. I at least know that there is someone who works in immigration law there. Yeah.
Right. Worth checking out on a lot of different levels. So can I go back to the why people don't report? You said fear of retaliation. You said because the cops don't respond. One of the things the Albany report points out is that reporting should be made easy. It should be made convenient. It should be made, language accessible. And also some community outreach about what is a hate crime. A lot of people feeling like it's not serious enough what happened to me. So just wonder, Jay and Ty, what you see. I know you said retaliation and you said being discouraged, but why do people not report these crimes? Again, in addition to that. And those
I'll go for it, Chai. For example, during March 16, there's stuff going on and the AAPI Stop Asian Hate thing. So Chai and I, we went to the Candle virtual thing. Then I reached out to my community. We trying to sell T-shirts to say Stop Asian Hate. And these are the comment come back from my community. Say, you wearing those shirts or you asking for it by wearing the shirt. Just leave it alone, step away from it so no one bother you. You're wearing a shirt, they can come up and they're going to punch you in the face. Because that's what kind of attitude that I have in my community, that they discourage from that. And most of the shirts I sell to are to the Caucasian community, support more than, but with our own community. So I hope that answered. Chai?
Yeah, I mean, can I say the words less to lose, right? If that's really, in a practical way, that maybe white Caucasian people have less to lose than Asians. I don't know.
Yes.
Jai?
Yeah, I think the other part is also a very cultural and societal issue where we are living in and the community stuff and educational levels that the community has. So as I said before, many of the Bhutanese community people who are living in Central New York, the 40 years and older people, majority, 90% are uneducated because they have no education and they have not got any opportunity to go back to their school back in life. So like my parents, they are in 50s, late 50s and early 60s, and they never been to the school. And now they are afraid to go outside and talk to the other people, right? So the educational level and the societal means what we have and where we come from. If the police comes to our homes, they think that the police will take away a family member to the jail. If they have to be appeared in the court, they think that they have done something wrong and they will be arrested. So that means the educational level is so low. So my point earlier was also taking this message of if the legal rights, the responsibilities, if we able to educate those people, I think that will change some level of degree and they can call 911 or report the issue and might be that is a hate crime, who knows, and that's the level we are living in the community. And I came to know, and I happened to know after 1 year that these things happen in my community, in my home. I know there are many families who they are attacked in the home. Everything was stolen. Even the jewelries on the street, when they're walking in a group, they were knocked down because they think that these people don't speak English, no education, they will not call 911. And that was a repeated problems again and again in the community. So this is what I mean.
Can I add one more to that? One more
Yeah.
before. Also, too, for my culture, if, let's say, for an example, if somebody from my the neighborhood called the police, and the police come to the house, to whatever the situation is, there's a stigmatism to that, right? They don't know the story, but their rumors will say that's trouble a family. I don't know, is it domestic or just something happening that make it, when the police come, the people stigmatize themselves, I guess, and we sabotage ourselves. So a lot of that too. That's why most of the community don't want to make phone call, because they don't want to be labeled as trouble.
This sounds like a great project for Syracuse law students, getting out in the community and explaining how, maybe helping to make it a little easier to report it, explaining how being targeted because of your race is a hate crime. Chris, are there strategies that AAPI is promoting around that issue about the barriers to reporting hate crimes?
There is, and let me just first start with that AAPI has been a little hesitant to repeat that to the community, you need to report. Why? Not because we don't want to tell the community to report, but we told them in 2021, we were very upfront in telling them to report. But as we looked and we sat down and we looked at what happened once they did report, everything that Ty and Jay talked about, we saw in real time and for real, the difficulties. And so although there are plenty of things to report, the district attorneys and the police departments really needed to do a much better job of investigating, talking to people, bringing them along. Okay, so with that said, what has AAPI done in response to that? We have created something we call the HEART program, Hate Eradication Active Response Team. We love those things. And so what we do there is not represent people pro bono.
Mm-hmm.
What we do there is we walk people through the process, whether it's talking to the police, whether it's talking to the DAs, and just being there. Because you know what? Nothing will crush you like walking through local government sort of red tape, particularly when you're under stress and you're a victim of crime. Try doing it for a house, a license to do renovations to your house. It's difficult, right? The institution is bureaucratic, it's complex, it's not responsive. And so what we've done is advocate for people, not necessarily in this lawyer-client role, but walking them through the bureaucratic red tape, particularly for first-generation immigrants, is a real challenge. And us being there can help. It doesn't mean that we're doing all these bang-up things, but we're really appreciating at the nitty-gritty level how difficult it is. And this is really, once again, speaking to the first-generation immigrant experience, which is really all about survival and stability, and about providing for the children so that they can achieve all the things that they're able to.
So Chris, when you say walking them through, do you mean a lawyer? Number one, is it a lawyer program?
It is a lawyer program, but we are not in a lawyer-client relationship.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So
Right.
they'll be like, these are the issues I'm encountering. We'll be like, okay, let's figure it out. Let us get a meeting. And so we're there advocating and talking, but we're not necessarily like, in some ways, it's almost like bleeding into like MSW social work, right? And a
Yes.
lot of the pro bono work that we've been doing for first generation immigrants, actually a lot of it is wrapped around feels like social work, to be honest. Yeah.
And it sounds like what Jai and Ty are doing, right, as lay people, right? And finding their own way. But can I ask you, Chris, is this the piece that was being organized at St. John's for the law students that Elaine, because Elaine had spoken to me about one thing she wanted to do after your first report. Just wondered.
It might be, because Elaine is, of course, one of the executive editors of this report. These ideas are forming within the community, the Asian
Yes.
American community, in ways that has received new energy and new vigor. And once again, of course, the challenge for, I think, our audience here is replicating that in more, sort of rural or not so, sort of not with millions of people and new immigrants. That's the challenge. But and I think Elaine might have been trying to do that with her law school, students or clinics. But
Right.
it's
What you
really
mentioned.
right.
It's ideas coming from all over. And Jai, did you say there was a question in the chat? Because I am having a little
That was
trouble.
from Thomas. That was from Thomas Ho.
What
Are
do you
there
say?
AAPI-focused community groups working in this area? One of their key initiatives. I'm actually would like clarification as to what area and what's the key initiative.
I read it as geographic area, but
Okay.
I am not.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly.
Well, I think you're looking at him, Thomas, Jai, the New American Forum.
Yeah, and
right.
I'll say, having spent a lot of time in the pro bono clinics, 80% of the problems that walked into the pro bono clinics were not legal problems and did not require the lawyer to tell them. But they felt better that they talked to a lawyer, and a lawyer kind of gave them some advice. A lot of it was mental illness. A lot of it was institutional difficulty in accessing institutional knowledge, how to deal with New York City bureaucracy, which is really set out on fining and regulating small businesses, immigrant businesses, and kind of things like, right? I mean, I'm just looking at it, I'm like, wow, there's 20% that are real, like, this is a legal discrimination problem. Let's file a complaint. Easy. Like that wasn't everything. That was like 20% of stuff. Housing issues, landlord, okay, easy. That's a real legal problem that's going to be coming through the housing court. But the vast majority was like, accessing and working through local government, federal government. How do you fill out this form? What do I do? How do I respond? Well, just talk, right? Things that, don't necessarily require a lawyer, which is why that legal hands probably is very effective.
Thank you. Lillian, can I take a minute? I
Sure.
just like to clarify about the NAF role, the New American Forum, as well as the AAPI. So I'm a president of New American Forum, is a 501c4 advocacy organization, non-partisan, and we are a group of leaders from many nations, South Asian, Europe, South America, and African. So all over the world. So we are not only focused on AAPI community as a NAF team, but we rather look after all the immigrants and refugees and New Americans from across the globe. That's our focus in our Central New York. On the side of AAPI, so there wasn't much momentum about AAPI in this community. And Ty, we just had, as Ty said before, we just had a first event last year that we knew. And right now, currently I'm serving on South Asian for America for New York State political advocacy or advocator. That's my other role for the SAFA. And Ty is actively working under AAPI to educate. And so we don't have any initiatives right now, but we are on our side to working for our AAPI community to empower and move forward where we can able to get support and help them to get forward and empower themselves. So
those are all great initiatives, it sounds like. Ty, did you want to add something, Ty?
Yes, I do. Again, I said earlier, and I hope this to be heard. We need a representation in Central New York. We need I did the first AAPI festival. I invited a lot of the dignitary people, but then I'm only one. But we need a position here, because AAPI is so big. It's not just people. When people talk about Asian, they're just thinking, Vietnamese, Chinese, and like that. But we're looking at the islanders, right? Some of the Chai community are considered Asian also. They don't realize how big Asian is. Even some of the Middle Eastern are considered Asian. So what we need here is we need someone actually have a position here in Central New York, represent AAPI, period. Because NAF, we're doing the best we can. But again, I say earlier, there's so much China I can do. He's the president, I'm the vice president, but we work all day long. So we don't have the time to get attentive to most of the detail needed. So I'm requesting, if Chris, Albany or New York, whatever, arm long enough, give us somebody here. Look like us, sound like us, walk like us, and talk like us, so that we feel comfortable, come to that person. And I think that's the beginning that we need. That's the confidence we built, not just for the Asian, but for all community here as a whole.
Are there not any Asian lawyers in the Onondaga County Bar? I think I did know a man who worked at Bond. Although I understand.
There is one, work for Melvin and Melvin. His name is Dan-Hoo Seol. He's from South Korean. Matter of fact, he did so much work for NAF. He's our advisor, and then he also advisor for our food pantry. But he's only one. we need more, and also NAF missions to create more law enforcement officer. Right now we have 2. We have one Burmese and one Bhutan, and we have one Vietnamese that there's a fire department. We're trying to get more people look like us in upper level.
Colleen, you look like you want to say something.
I'm agreeing, and I'm thankful that you're, advocating in this space and in every forum that I've met you in. I know there are other Asian attorneys in Syracuse. I know a couple, but I don't know how involved everyone is in different communities and what that looks like. So it's definitely, a call to action in that sense.
It is hard, right? I'm just saying, as an Asian attorney, to think about all of the causes that you want to support in your community, right? But also our own desire to be part of the Asian community. So I think that there are a number of legal services organizations that serve your community. And in the chat, we got some detail about the telephone clinic that the Volunteer Lawyers Project runs right in Syracuse, and as well Legal Services of Central New York, which I think they said they have a couple of community organizers.
I was curious. I'm sorry, Lillian, I don't mean to interrupt because I'm not even the moderator here.
Please.
Ty and Jai, have you met Paul Ciavari at all? He works with legal. He's the one who is referenced as being the community organizer. And if you haven't, I'm happy to make that connection for you too.
I need a connection.
He's Central New York, right?
We are very optimistic, Colleen. We're willing to meet whoever wants to hear us, whoever willing to listen to us. We just want our voice to be heard, or connecting how we can be helpful. We're not here to create problem. We want to be part of the solution. That's all we want.
So are your colleagues and neighbors voting?
Yes. Matter of fact, you say that, I'm going to bring this up.
Okay, I brought it up. It's cool.
So you talk about voting. Most of the people who candidate run for office, they give all our new Americans a bad name that we don't vote, right? So let me get the record straight here. Syracuse been since 1848. That's the last time the refugee was in the common council. 2 years ago, we have been elected our first common council. His name is Joe Majuk. After 172 years, we have our own common council, 3rd district here in Central New York. So that's to show. Also, Chai, the man sitting right here, he also ran for office as well. He ran for 1st district, right? So we are voting. It's just people don't look at us. Our vote are important. But we are doing our best at NAF. We're trying to advocate our people, teach our people how to register and how to vote, and how important it is their vote counts. Because most people say their vote don't count. we are doing our best here to let them know that our vote count. We have won our own on office right now. As a matter of fact, he is running for Congress as we speak.
So as a New American Forum, one of the program that we do is educate and teach and register to vote. And also we host a candidate forum every year, local to state to federal election. And we invite all of our community members to listen and get to know their candidates and then vote on their own way. So as a non-partisan, we don't advocate to vote one party over other party, but rather we invite everybody and invite all the candidates and have them say their platforms, and we educate as much as we can in the community. So this was started a few years ago. So we are building that momentum, and we have new leaders, new young peoples are coming to join in our New American Forum, so that the more young people will be motivated to go into the political life, as well as to learn more about the political system in the US. So that's what we have been doing right now.
I have a wrap-up question, and there's going to be a poll, but to Mary, if you're still with us, if it was a year from now and you live in Syracuse, right, what would you like to see that's different in Syracuse as a result of the conversation we had tonight? Something that germinated, we learned during your talk, something you heard Ty and Jai talk about, something you heard from Chris or Colleen. What would you like to see that's different in Syracuse if you came back from Italy, Mary, in a year?
I'd like to see a pilot project because we've enumerated a lot of needs, a lot of challenges, and it would be wonderful to see a pilot project that we could initiate that, being very creative, we could pick one thing and work on it together, the community, the university, the local government, the local bar, and that we could work together on and say we're going to try one pilot project and we're going to put resources into it, and then see the success of that one pilot project, and then from there move on to further success. But it would be great if after this conversation together, we could put our heads together and with creativity, with energy, with hope, create one pilot project that we could then see success from.
Mary, you're inspired tonight. Jai, if you came back a year from tonight, what would you like to see in your community that this conversation tonight started? And people can also vote. You can text in your 1 or 2 or 3 words about what you lawyers think, what can lawyers do to increase justice for AAPIs in your community. But Jai, tonight you percolated what? A year from now, you want to see it.
Thank you. So since this is a AAPI month, I highly like to recognize and thank you to all the AAPI community who are working in all levels in the communities. So high salute to them. So we like to see from my own perspective, so the May month can make it an AAPI month for the Central New York, so that we can have a cultural festival, understanding of the culture, get all the resources to that festival or API heritage event, so that we all come together and celebrate and learn more.
That's great. I hope that you will see that a year from tonight. Ty, how about you? A year from tonight, something that you started tonight in this conversation, some words you said, some words you heard. What would you like to see?
I'm going to echo Chai. We ran a lot of events here. I would love to have. I ran the first AAPI here in Syracuse. I have 180 out of nowhere. So I would love to have this as a big event, and we can get together and educate our people and let the people meet the people who care about them. Let them know that there is hope for them. And maybe we can break out that barrier where we explain to them, the police are the friendly people. They're not bad people. or I would love to have an office where they can feel comfortable go to office duty for attorney. Maybe you have a group the helping hand, whatever you say there. Maybe some of the lawyers.
Legal hand.
Yeah, one hours a week out of 7 days. Do 2 hours, 12 to 2, whatever it is, the time that people feel comfortable walking with certain issues as small as immigration to a traffic ticket. That's what I hope to see.
And Chris, all right, Chris, what if we actually got you to Syracuse a year from now? What would you hope to see that you got started tonight?
Well, it would depend on, Professor Cito and the law school. And, I think it's that idea of taking the linguistic ability and the students that come to Syracuse and Syracuse Law School and undergrad and graduate and other educational institutions, tying that together with some of the pro bono activities here at AAPI and serving the population remotely, taking advantage of the way that we interact now, so to serve the people better than they have before would be a real nice silver lining to all the Zooming we've been doing in the era of COVID-19.
Absolutely. Colleen, you wanna be in this?
I just am really encouraged by this vision that we see on the screen right now. I love this, and I hope we get a screenshot and can make something more happen from this panel. Thank you all for such informational insights.
A great night. I wish you all would come to Albany. Okay. So thank you so much. And I think Elke Sorensen can save this, Colleen, I think. Okay.
Perfect.
Jeff,
thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Now do we leave?
Yep, that wraps up our CLE. Again, thank you to the panelists, and please remember to send in your CLE form if you would like credit along with an evaluation.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great night.
Good night.
Be well wherever you go. Bye-bye.
Colleen, you stay on. You get off.
I'm still here.
And in the one that you included, can you put voice on there? Have a voice?
Yes. Well, we can send it to. We can have Lillian include that.
You know what, Ty? I'll just say that the way this works is the more people who voted, the bigger the language is, right?
On YouTube.
A lot of people said hope, right? A lot of people said
I actually have to publish it so people can see it.
I think I have to go, right? But so Ty, you know what? You're gonna have to make it happen on your own. Which I think you can. I get the feeling that you can. So it was a joy to meet all of you. Bye-bye.
Ty and Jai, I will send you an email so we can follow up from this.
And Mary, thank you for calling in all the way from Italy. Have a wonderful time.
Thank you all. Super appreciate it.
Well, thank you, everyone.